Hey there, welcome to the Breakthrough Creative. I am your host, John McDavitt, and this is the place where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. I love artists and I love making money. And I think that those are two particular subjects that need a really good look, especially for creatives who want to make a living doing something that they love. And today I have a really special guest. His name is Dan Barry. And Dan is a cartoonist, podcaster, and educator from Shrewsbury in the UK. Yes, Great Britain. He is the host of the podcast Make It, Then Tell Everybody, which has been running since 2012, and he has over 200 episodes featuring interviews with other comic artists and illustrators about how they do what it is they do. He's been making comics since the late 2000s, and he has a new book out soon called Rivers. Go buy it. A follow-up with writer David Gaffney to the book The Three Rooms in Valerie's Head. They're both available from Top Shelf Comix. He is a comics educator and for 11 years ran a degree course in comics in North Wales, UK. He now gives workshops and short courses alongside his freelance work. Dan is a pretty cool guy. He's got a lot of experience in his back pocket, and I had such a good time. This might be my silliest interview ever. I had such a good time chatting with him, and we talked for so long about things of importance, I believe, that I made it into a two-parter. So here is part one.
My name is Dan Barry. I am I guess primarily I'm a cartoonist. I think that's what I'm mostly known for. But I mean, this is a big question because I tend to do a lot of things now.
You are 40.
I've packed in a lot of experience into those years. That was kind of a lie. If I was going to say this like I'm a 9-year-old, I'm 39 and a half. So I'm known as a cartoonist. I make comic books, and I've been doing that for I would guess most of my adult life. Is one I did a couple of years ago with a writer called David Gaffney. This was out with Top Shelf a little while ago. Just very recently, we've just finished a second book together, so that'll be out in a couple of months. I do things like 24-hour comics as well, where you sit down and draw a page of comics every hour for a day, and so you end up with, at the end of a day, a whole book, which is sort of a mad masochistic drawing challenge that doesn't really exist for any good reason other than to sort of flex your drawing muscles. I'm a podcaster. I run a podcast called Make It Then Tell Everybody, and I figured out just earlier today that it turns 10 years old tomorrow, which is nuts. I've been doing it for nearly a quarter of my life.
Wait, let me pause you for 1 second, and sure. I just want to, hey, that's fantastic. I mean that completely sincerely. Like, that is, holy cow, that's amazing.
There's been a couple of hiatuses. Is that, yeah, let's say that's the correct word.
Is that Latin?
It's Latin. I don't know if you know this. I used to work in a university, so I'm actually very clever. If anyone has worked in a university before, you'll know that doesn't necessarily line up. So it did with a couple of hiatuses in there. So I think I just recorded episode number 217 yesterday, which will go out later this week. So it's a show where I talk to other creative folk about how they do what they do. They generally tend to be people in and around the comics industry. So writers, creators, artists, publishers, printers, sometimes editors. The idea is that I'm talking to people who have an interesting take on comics, and they can provide something useful to people coming in. That was the whole aim behind the podcast. I was teaching in a university at the time, and I couldn't find anything that would give my students that kind of experience and that peep inside people's brains. So I decided to make it. And there we go. Now it exists.
Yeah, for a decade.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So yeah, I was. I'm going to pretend that we never had this conversation, even though we just had it moments ago.
But, shall I do a spit take?
Yeah, please. Like, do it. Can you do it in Braille for the listeners for the podcast? Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, so I was telling Dan that I have been stalking him on his podcast, but he wouldn't know that because I was just downloading them
It's kind of a
anonymously.
one-way experience, the podcast.
It really is. It really is. And he's an incredible interviewer. He's a host, and I highly recommend the show. And I'll have links for it and whatnot at the end. But I just really enjoy his take. He is self-irreverent. Is that a term? I think so.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it self-deprecating. But I think
No.
one of my rules of being a creative person is you mustn't deprecate, because
Yeah.
people might believe you. If you say,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is terrible," people will go, "It sounds terrible."
Yeah.
But you can undermine yourself, I think. We were chatting beforehand, and I was saying that part of my ethos behind the podcast is that I'm allowed to sound stupid. My aim, when I was teaching, was that I didn't have to be the smartest sounding person in the room. I could sound as stupid as possible in order to make the people in the room smarter. And making yourself sound smart isn't the same as making other people in the room smart. So I would try and say it as dumb as possible, like dumb it down and down and down until everyone understood. And then we can start to build up and get more and more complicated. And that's basically the way I work with the interviews as well, trying to find a common way of talking about things that enough people can get into. So if people are talking kind of insider jargon, that nomenclature of whatever, and it sounds a little bit highfalutin, I'll ask really dumb questions like, when you say screen printing, what does that actually involve? What is that? Where do you get your ideas? These dumb questions, which people are often afraid of asking because they don't want to sound stupid, and I am perfectly okay with sounding stupid.
How did you get to that point? How did you become so stupid?
How did I become quite so stupid?
How are you okay with looking the fool?
It's being very comfortable with knowing that I'm not. I know the extent and the limitations of my intellect. I know that I'm fairly smart. I know that I can turn my hand to most things. I know that I can understand things. I can take things apart and put them back together. I can build things. I can make things. So there's no. What's the way to say this? There's no hesitancy in or uncertainty in me doubting myself. Like, I don't feel like maybe I'm not very clever. I've never thought like, oh, maybe I'm not very clever. I know I'm not the world's smartest guy, but I know that I'm as clever as I need to be. And I don't think I need to compare myself with anyone else. I'm smarter than I used to be as well, which is, I guess, good. But I guess when I was lecturing, so I'd have to stand in front of a room full of people and try and be the tide that raised those boats. And if you get that wrong and people see it immediately, and you're trying to sound clever and you really don't know what you're talking about, people realize that immediately, and you immediately look stupid in the worst possible way. So I would rather deliberately look stupid than inadvertently look stupid. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
It did. Well, and I think I liked you when I didn't know you, and I was listening to the podcast. I think I like you even more now because there's a humility, and when you are aware that you don't need to sound incredibly intelligent or try to project that to people, especially those that you're trying to teach, right? Especially those that you're. Because there's a couple kinds of teachers, right? There's the teacher who's there for themselves, and there's a teacher who is there for everyone else. And if you're there for everyone else, there is a heart element that is pretty rare, actually.
Yeah, I spoke about this recently on the podcast. We did a sort of special episode all about teaching. And I firmly believe that we have two kinds of art teachers. And you can pretty much take all of the art teachers that I've ever had and experienced and seen and heard about, and you can split them directly down the middle and sort of put them on either side of the river. On the one side, you've got tour guides who are like, here is this cool thing. I'm going to take you around and show you all of these amazing things. Hop on my bus. We're going to go here. You're going to take photographs. You're going to have this wonderful experience. We're going to have a destination we're going to arrive at on time. You're going to have this incredible experience, and we're going to arrive somewhere. It's going to be great. Come with me. Take photographs. Get a suntan. Sounds great. And then you've got the gatekeepers who sort of, like the Sphinx from legend, will sort of sit in a misty desert somewhere and like perform some sort of riddle that you have to intuit the answer to. And if then you get the answer right, then you get the gates opened to forbidden knowledge, but not everyone is allowed through. And it's nonsense. It's a really destructive way of teaching, and I've seen it done a lot. I really don't like it.
Yeah,
for the audio listeners, I'm making a disgruntled face.
He really is. You should go watch
Furrowed
the YouTube
brow.
show just to see it. Yeah.
I think teaching is two jobs. There's the job of teaching, but then there's understanding the job that you're teaching as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to teach, I don't know, let's say drawing, being good at drawing doesn't mean you're good at teaching drawing.
Right.
You can be, you know, an able, capable draftsperson and an excellent teacher. You can teach people to draw. You can be an excellent, wonderful, like Michelangelo's ghost flies in, drops to his knees and starts weeping with joy at that amazing drawing you did. But if you're no good as a teacher, you can't teach it. Like, it's two skills. And I think people sort of forget this sometimes.
So there's technique, and then there is teaching, right? There's technique, and then there's explaining and breaking it down for that student, right? Because they're all different, right?
Yes.
And then, what do you think of the role of kind of what we were talking about, where the humility comes into play and the care and concern? Like, how much do you think that means to the student to know that you've really got their back?
It's a huge amount. I mean, because it gives you, you've got to have your legitimacy as you know, the person with the authority to teach the thing, and that, you know, that could be the, you know, capable draftsman side of things. But I think people respond to people as well, and to know that someone cares about you, got your back, and like, I know that you can do this, and is there to support you. And there has to be a level of trust, I think, because certainly when you're learning art and you're teaching art and you're thinking about art, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable in ways that you haven't before. You know, when you're a teenager and you've got your sketchbook and it's like the most special thing, and you don't want anyone to look inside it because it contains all of your flaws and vulnerabilities. Like, this is the thing that you then have to go and show to someone when you're learning to draw properly and getting better. And to show, so it's like lifting up your top and showing someone your stomach. I don't want to do that. I never want to do that. But that's the kind of thing you have to do. It's like going to the doctor to show them your bum hole. Like, I don't want to do that. And it's very uncomfortable. So having that level of trust is essential. And it's very much like working with a clinician. You want someone who is professional and capable and friendly, and not at all cold-handed and, you know, cold-mannered either.
Yeah.
That made any sort of horrible sense whatsoever.
It does. You know, I want to do an episode upcoming on criticism. And I think criticism has gotten a bad rap. And again, there are kind of two disciples of criticism, right? There's the disciple that comes in and just wants to tear everything apart.
Oh yeah.
And they get some kind of sick joy out of it. I don't even think everybody knows if they're that type of person. But then there's the criticism that is, hey, and however it's framed, right? It's, hey, look, this stuff, this is spectacular, this is good, this needs work. Like this isn't quite there yet. And please.
Well, I think when I was working with my students and we were trying to figure out how to give the criticism that we were trying to, you know, find ways to make it useful, you know, utility was always that thing that I would try and have at the core of it. How would we try and make this useful for the person? Because criticism, you know, just this doesn't work, that doesn't work, and this doesn't work. I would see people give criticism, the idea of there's a tangent in the drawing, where the two lines meet. I've seen people give criticism, go through someone's portfolio and say, there's a tangent, and there's a tangent, and there's a tangent. And it's like, yeah, we can see that you can recognize where tangents are, but this doesn't actually provide actionable, get better information. Like, tangents aren't the only thing that we need to fix here. So it would always come down to utility. What is it that you're trying to achieve, first of all? Like, what are the main intentions, and how do we know when we're achieving them? What are the things that are in the way of those things that are achieving them? Where does it land? Like, okay, here it is landing in the color they've used here to like indicate that the lantern has been kicked over by the horse and the barn is just beginning to burst into flames. The color there is really, really good. However, the sequence that leads up to that is really confusing. We don't know who left the lantern on the barrel. We don't know what time of day it is because the color up until then was confusing. We don't know if there's oil in it. Was it lit at this point? We don't know. Is that a donkey or is it a mule? Is it important that we know these things? So then we can work out those intentions and kind of work backwards to say, oh, this bit does work and we know what we're trying to achieve. However, in getting there, this became confused. This didn't work. I remember once I had a student who was writing a story about, I think, his brother who had autism. And one of the things that this brother would do would throw a ball in the air, throw a ball and catch it. And in every panel of this comic, the ball was in the air. And so you need to see him land. Otherwise, this is a story about a boy who can walk around levitating a ball everywhere. And it's little things like this. And you need to be able to find ways to say it kindly. I know that what you're trying to achieve is to say that this character throws a ball, that the horse kicks over the lantern. These are the end points. The moment we're not achieving those things, here's a way we can get out of it. And just to say, rubbish, this is terrible, I hate this, you've done a bad job there, doesn't achieve those things. What it does achieve is it makes people feel bad. And when they feel bad, they stop doing things and they hate you for it.
Right. Yeah. I really, I'm sorry, go ahead. I jumped in.
Yeah. No, I was just lamenting the idea of construction.
Yeah. I really like that you use the term utility. That's a great term, like utility of criticism. How can we use this in a way that is going to be positive, that is going to help somebody get to the place of achievement, like where they're trying to get to next? That's really good.
Yeah. But for me, it always comes down to communication, because you need to understand the person's intentions.
Yeah.
You can infer what you think that they're trying to achieve, but until you talk to them and try and work out, for sure, and they say, oh, definitely I want it to be the farmhand that came in and accidentally left it on the side when they didn't do the thing, but then it wasn't supposed to be the horse, it was actually a chicken that flew up and did the thing. And you're like, oh, no, I didn't get any of that. We need to start again. Like, none of this actually landed where you thought it did. Oh no, I thought that would be a fine thing. No, right. So until we, you have it actually said. But again, it's about revealing those vulnerabilities to someone. And then often a lot of the problems with receiving criticism is that it means that things are going to have to change. And often that will also mean that the work that you've put in is now useless. Yeah. You're going to have to just sweep it off the table and into the fire because it's gone forever. And so also reminding people that the work isn't wasted in any respect. At the very worst, with the idea that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. We've got experience, and that's worth something. By Jove, must be. But we've got that hindsight now that then makes the next thing much easier to do. Yeah. Ideally, trying to frame things positively, I guess.
Yeah, really good. You like how I'm encouraging you as if you needed it? Well, that's really good.
Thank you. I feel good about myself. This positive reinforcement you're giving me here has swelled me with endorphins.
I'm going to include that in the invoice. So
I made these endorphins. They're mine. You can't bill me for my own endorphins. Thank you very much, John.
What was the stuff in Star Wars that people had in their blood?
Midichlorians.
Midichlorians. I accidentally gave someone midichlorians, and I didn't charge them the right amount for that. I had I was years ago. I was young and insecure, and I've always been a pretty solid draftsperson, painter, and whatnot. And a friend of mine had invited me to go plein air painting with her, and they did it as a big group. And we went down to the city, and we had done one, and apparently they would all get together after, and they would critique. And I couldn't make that critique. I literally couldn't, because I had to go somewhere, and I was looking forward to it. So we did another one, and we were painting on Michigan Avenue, or right over there, real busy. We're out in the middle of the city, a beautiful summer day, painting. And I was pretty pleased with what I had done. I hadn't worked a lot with oils, and I got done with it. And we go to this local bookstore, and now we're going to critique. And nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody. It didn't seem that anybody in the group was real comfortable with critique. So nobody really said anything. So the guy who led the thing would then critique. And the stuff he was saying, I think he was pretty good, but I think I was insecure and I was not taking it well, what he was saying about other people's works. And I remembered, I was thinking to myself, when he gets to mine and he lets me have it, I'm going to let him have it.
I'm going to jump up and I'm going to punch him on the nose.
So he got to mine and he said, this is really good. Like I might have this one building not be so dark so that it pushes back. It's really good. And I said, well, thank you. And I said nothing else. I was so embarrassed. I was like, hi, this guy's pretty smart. So I'll probably cut this from the episode just because I wanted to share my silly story with you.
No, I'm going to keep referring back to this so you're not allowed to.
But it was, you know, I don't know what that did for me that day other than maybe to be able to look at criticism a little bit more subjectively and objectively, because criticism has that, right? Which is interesting with the work that you do, because I heard an episode with you talking about, or somebody, maybe the guest had brought it up, that if they're teaching the kind of storytelling that you teach and that you work in, you're not going to like any or many of the stories, right? Or some of the stories, I should say, but you're not there to comment necessarily on the topic.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I can open up Netflix and realize that 80% of it isn't going to be to my taste, but I can form an opinion on 100% of it. And if I bend my mind to it, I'm sure I can offer criticism and, you know, constructive comments on all of it as well. You know, and when you're working with someone on storytelling, the way I always think about a story is that it has this kind of definite structure to it that is almost ingrained in people's heads. I do an interesting workshop with students where we start with a little premise. The last one I did, I was in Denmark and we were teaching, and it was a workshop on storytelling and color. And so I said, we're going to make spooky stories. And cool, you know, it's coming up to Halloween. Cool, we'll make these spooky stories. And we were saying, how much ambiguity do you like in your stories? And a lot of them were like, I actually quite like a lot of ambiguity. I like the idea that there's, you know, an element left up to the reader that, you know, I get to decide for myself. I like that. You know, I like that choice. I like it. It's excellent. I'm like, I think you're lying. And I think it's a conscious lie. I don't think that you're sort of trying to deceive me, but I don't think that's correct. No. I like ambiguity. Okay. So after the end of the first week, and we got together and everyone was sort of presenting their stories in rough format. So just sort of penciled out, readable, but not beautiful. Any of the stories that sort of had cliffhanger endings or any sort of ambiguity, you can see everyone sort of folding their arms and going, yeah, but what happens about that lantern that gets kicked over? You know, surely that there should be some more. I'm like, people hate ambiguity, and so it's very much, for me, it's about tying up these loose ends, and it's not about, a happy ending or a sad ending, or it's about this sense of satisfaction that all these little loose ends got tied back up together. And it doesn't have to be done in a big, boring, clunky way. It can be done elegantly with, a little bit of a drawing in the background that makes someone go, oh, that's what happened to that lantern. That's very clever. It can be very subtle as the B in the word subtle. It can be, big, dumb, as big and dumb as the B in the word dumb. Don't know what I'm going on about that. But, the...
Throw in some Latin, fast.
I can't do it. Can't remember any Latin at all. So it's all about taking the ideas and the way that the ideas flow through the story and making sure that they just pinch off and all of the little strands of the story get tied up or tied into a different bit and get resolved. And it doesn't have to get solved, but it has to get answered.
Yeah.
And that for me is the most interesting thing about stories, is that you can see how something becomes satisfying, and ways that you can use either the text or the narration or the dialogue or the drawing or the character or the body language or the arch of an eyebrow, just to make it a little definite into how you make that story suddenly tie up, and you go, oh, that's very clever. And you get that, I often tell the students to think, like, what noise do you want people to make when they finish reading your story? Because there's some noises that you want them to make. Is a great noise. Is a great noise. Is not so great a noise. It's not a satisfying noise that someone, I want someone to make after reading my book. I want them to go, oh, it's really good.
That's good. That's good. I like that. It made me think of, delivering cookies to someone, and they're really looking forward to the chocolate chip cookie, and then you haven't used any vanilla extract in it. They're like, what's it doesn't taste right. They probably wouldn't say that, right?
My kid's been baking you cookies. They're not very good, but I know exactly what you mean.
It's like, you don't want to leave it abstract. You want it to taste right. You want it to fulfill and satisfy, and that's what a story needs to do.
Yeah. And there is, I don't want to make it sound like I hate experimental storytelling, or I hate ambiguity. I think there is absolutely a place in storytelling for ambiguity. Nothing needs to be completely spoon-fed to people, and there is obviously a huge role for the human imagination in stories. But I think subtlety is the watchword there.
People love David Lynch movies, but I don't want to watch them all the time, every day of the week.
No, I like ice cream. Yeah, but it's not a balanced diet.
Right.
Not the way I do it.
Nor I. So let me take you into drawing and to storytelling. Let's go back. I'm not going to hypnotize you. I'm just going to ask you, what came first? Was it story? Was it drawing? And what piqued your interest into those things?
When I was a kid, it was drawing. I really liked drawing. I was one of those kids that would take like Asterix and Tintin's books and like copy them. I'd trace them. I would try and figure out how to draw them. And obviously, a lot of them were drawn with brushes and technical pens that I didn't have. I'd have, big biros and pencils. And so I could never make them look right. I always found it a little bit frustrating. But I was the kid in our class who could draw. And so instead of like doing maths, for example, I would draw cartoon characters. I remember getting really, really badly in trouble I must have been about 6 or 7, because instead of doing a maths exam or test, I just drew Count Duckula. I don't know if you had Count Duckula in the States. I drew a really, really good Count Duckula across all of the answers. I remember thinking, I don't know my 7 times table. I can really draw Count Duckula. I was really pleased with it. I got so badly told off. So drawing was always like there in front and center, I guess. When I got a little older, I had friends who were into X-Men comics, and they had this book that explained how much all of the X-Men comics were. And they had a few X-Men comics, and I remember reading them and being really confused by them, because it was like trying to jump into a soap opera halfway through and not knowing anything. But then there was this book that said how expensive everything was, and I was like, comics aren't for me. I have no idea what's going on, and it's too expensive. This one's like £800. Like, no, I'm not buying that one book for £800. This is ridiculous. So it completely put me off, and I kind of ignored comics for a long time. I was interested in stories. I've always been interested in like technology, how things work, and stories. So I started making films, music videos with friends. We'd be in bands and we'd play, gigs and punk rock shows and, teenage stuff. And we'd make music videos for people and do like recordings for them. And these music videos kind of evolved over time into weird sort of like home zombie movies. And then we started to get a little more complex. We'd actually start writing scripts and planning to meet up at particular times of the day to get particular shots. And at that point, we realized that it was difficult to get people to do things at particular times of day. And people are unreliable. And I think that's where my control freak personality started to come out a bit, and I started to realize, well, I can just draw it instead. And I didn't really know anything about comics or how comics worked, other than the sort of that book of £800 comics, whatever it is. So in my mind, I was inventing comics as I was going along, and they were just little mini comics. I really didn't know how they worked or what they were for. And then when I was at university, I was doing a degree in multimedia design, again, technology and creativity. I wanted to make websites and movies, and that seemed like the way to do it. It seemed like I could do anything I wanted on that course, and I sort of did. I kind of bullied my way through it and did what I wanted, which was fine. I don't use any of those skills anymore, I don't think. All of the software is obsolete. But, it was nice to learn how to learn, I suppose. That's the thing I took away from it. But I read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics while I was studying. And it was one of those sort of like, oh, right, okay, that's really interesting. So I started mixing the web design stuff and the interactive design, installation design stuff that I was doing with some of the stuff that I've been reading in Scott McCloud's books. And so I started emailing Scott and saying, I've got this idea about comics. And he was very kind and generous and started, conversing with me by email, which is really nice. It was very, very kind and generous of him. I think he was working on making comics at the time. I remember him emailing me saying, look, can you just call me? My hands hurt from drawing. Just call me. It's much easier. I remember, hello, just call Scott McCloud on the telephone. Didn't know what a time difference was, It was very embarrassing. But it was really nice to get that sort of little glimpse into this world of comics that I didn't know anything about. I'd assumed it was all X-Men, and then all of a sudden these gates opened and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's loads of people in there. And so that was when I really started to think carefully about drawing again, because I hadn't, everything was computers up until that point. So I decided I was going to sort of sit down and get good at drawing, because I thought, because I was better than everyone I went to school with at drawing, that meant I was good at drawing. And that's not true. I was just better than people who couldn't draw. So then
Small pond.
Whoa! So seeing people who could actually draw was incredibly sobering. And so that's what I do now, is I spend most of my free time figuring out how to try and get better at drawing. And that's never gone away. I think no matter how good I get, I always know that the hill continues to go upwards, and I don't think I'm ever going to get to the point where I'm satisfied with the way that I draw, like not happy with it. I'm content, and I know that, again, utility. I'm aware of the utility my drawing has at the level it is at the moment, what I can do with it, which is, perfectly workable for what I'm doing. And I know that I can do more as well. So that's been that, really. I'm always trying to figure out how to do things slightly better. And it's, at the moment, I'm figuring out quality of line with a pencil. No tone, no hatching, no wash, no nothing, just characters and lines, nowhere to hide. Which is interesting and deeply unsettling. Again, it's lifting up my top and showing everyone my stomach, which is, no one wants to see it, and it's not particularly pretty, but it's and it's uncomfortable, but it's interesting.
It is. When you started to, mix story. I mean, after it's not like it just happened. Like that's just what you happened upon. It's like that you talk about the whole experience you have that
Mm.
included performance, it included technical craft, it included looking at things you knew you didn't want to do, but there was something about the comics that you fell in love with. There was something about that storytelling process, and then being able to control it. Right, it
Yeah.
was yours. How did that merge into a career? Because I'm assuming you had university, right, and then
Yeah.
you became a professor or teacher, instructor.
Yeah. So I spent the third year of my university degree. It was kind of negotiated. So they said, you pitch us some ideas about what you want to do, and then do them. And so I did a big project about interactive comics. Like how can they be interactive? What are the ways that you can interact with comics? And it was a really interesting technical exercise. And the thing I came away with was that you can't. You kind of ruin them. You ruin the sort of the purity of the experience. And I found the whole thing very dissatisfying. Really satisfying in a technical sense, and I really want to see them work. I'd be fascinated to see how they can be put together. And there's been some very impressive examples, but for me, they don't have that same personal experience you do when you open up a book and you get that one-on-one experience with a comic. You're fully in control of it, and you're having that mind melding Vulcan nerve pinch grip experience with an author and an artist, which I really, really like. So I came away dissatisfied with this idea of interactive comics, but it absolutely infected with the idea of making comics. And so I threw myself into, drawing. So I think someone said once, you've got to draw 100 pages of terrible comics before you get any good. I must have done that a few times over. I've done a lot of bad comics no one will ever see. Dreadful.
Hey,
They
let
ended
me
up in
ask you this.
landfill, I'm sure.
Let me ask you this with all the ET Atari games. Let me ask you this, as far as the interactive comics, was that like interactive? Was it kind of a choose your own story kind of a thing? Was that what you mean by interactive?
Yeah, there was a choose your own story version.
Yeah,
There were sort of interactive 3D interfaces.
yeah.
There was sort of click and drop versions of it. There was expanded versions of it. There was input your own text versions of
So
it.
was the problem it was too ambiguous? Like you were talking about
Yeah, I
earlier,
think
right?
so.
It's like pick your own
Yeah,
thing.
I think the thing that I felt most strongly about at the time, and I think I haven't thought about it in a long time, so I might have changed my mind, is that the thing I love about comics is that you are fully in control of this temporal experience. You read it at your own pace, and it's unlike animation or cinema where time happens to you. It sort of
Yeah.
washes over you, and a 3-hour film takes 3 hours regardless. The thing I loved about comics is that if your mood changes, or if it's too hot, or if it's too cold, or if you're I don't know, whatever, like changes, variables change around you, your experience of the comic changes with it, and your experience of time, the way I read it could be different to the way you read it, and it becomes
It's
this
already
intense personal
interactive.
thing. Yeah, it is. And it's drawing from your own personal experience of the images in sequence depicted, and your understanding of how that works. So it becomes completely contextual to your own experience. And I really, really like that. When I'm drawing comics, I'm always thinking, like, how do I try and trigger that experience in someone who's reading, so it has that intended effect? And I'm just throwing baseballs into the dark and hoping someone catches them. It's just a best guess, and I think the best comics have that best guess. I think this is the impact it's going to have on the reader, and I love that. So having interactive comics, I felt just sort of whisked a lot of that away from me and became a little bit gimmicky. It didn't really add anything. I felt it kind of sucked something away from it in some way.
Yeah, it's. I thought of a conductor when you were expressing that to me. A conductor who's like kind of bringing the music along, and maybe composer is a better way to frame it, and that they
Yeah,
know right where to throw that string in that's just going to elicit that. Yeah,
yeah.
have you watched Lost? Were you a Lost person?
I never watched Lost.
Any have you watched any of the new Star Treks? Michael
I've
Giacchino.
watched the new Star Treks.
So
Yes.
Michael Giacchino has this thing that he does. He's the composer, and he'll hit this string, and it just, in me, I just get melancholy and sad because of the string. He's got me, you know, and it's
Yeah.
just, it's his gift. Like, that's the thing that he knows how to do. He wrote the music for Up, and so he's
Right.
that guy, and he's just, it's
Right.
it's quite a powerful tool if you can somehow uh contain the power, right, and then
Yeah.
zap people with it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the graphic novelist Chris Ware, he describes, comics, is the closest thing to comics he describes as being musical notation. So it's just
Interesting.
symbols on the page that can be interpreted infinitely. You can have cover versions. The symbols are just indications for how they should be interpreted, and then the different musician can play the tune with a slightly different slant on it, a slightly different swing to it, and then you've got this whole new interpretation of that particular passage. And comics are exactly the same.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like that. That's it. You sound so smart now.
I know, but
I
I'm
think
just
that was
parroting someone
good.
else's voice, you see.
I'll edit them out. It's
Thank
fine. You
you.
never referred to
I
that
take full
person.
credit for that myself. I
So
feel like I got distracted halfway through that answer and started talking about music.
it's probably because I distracted you by talking about music.
Mm.
So I can't. I'm sorry. Let's see. Um,
Where did we get up to? Oh, how did I get into then drawing comics?
yes.
Oh, yeah. So then I started drawing comics.
Excellent. When did you start composing music?
Oh, uh,
Do you write
that's about,
music?
yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. Music was like one of those things that happened in tandem with
Yeah.
drawing. Both my
I had
parents
no.
are
I just threw
musical.
that out as a joke because we got into
Oh,
composition. But I see the
there's a,
guitar.
there's a, over lockdown, there's been, I think at one point there were 17 guitars in the house.
Really?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
might have a problem. But I always used to, I think I have three brothers. Both my parents play guitar. My mother has a degree in music. So there was a
Oh
musical
wow.
house growing up. So I think we all play bass or guitar or stringed instruments of some sorts. So I was in bands, I think from like the age of 12 or 13, playing punk rock shows and staying out beyond my bedtime.
So
For
you had
quite a long
a
time.
really creative experience to begin with in your family.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't feel it the way at the time, I guess, because everything feels completely normal.
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
you don't really have any other experience
Sure.
at the time. But now, sort of looking back, thinking, that was quite good actually.
Yeah.
I mean, my hearing is terrible. That's why I have such big headphones, so I can actually hear things. These are turned all the way up.
To 11.
Yeah.
What about Dad?
Oh, yeah, he used to play guitar as well. Yeah.
He did. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's, I've known, like, it feels like two different types of artists too. And
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the artists that have had the supportive family, and there's artists who haven't. And
Yeah.
that can break really bad.
Yes. Yeah.
Really
Oh, my
bad.
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think my parents were always supportive, but they were always kind of a little bit, I don't know, not distant about it, just a little bit bewildered about it, because because I have three brothers. There's four of us.
Yeah.
Two of my brothers are fairly introverted. They're quiet. They're quiet people. My parents are both introverts. They're both quiet people as well. My youngest brother Simon and we're both extroverts. And so my parents sort of had this cuckoo moment with these children that came into their house. Like, the hell is this loud thing that's suddenly arrived and like demands attention and like seems to get recharged by having people pay attention to it? What is this thing? So they were just a bit bewildered, by wanting to go off and play punk rock shows and jump around on stage with a guitar and have people look at them, which was foreign to their experience. They couldn't think of anything they would like less. So sitting down and drawing was fine. The sort of the punk rock thing was just a bit, I do not understand this.
Would they come see your shows?
They would drive, a van full of equipment and drop us off and pick us up later, which is exactly what I wanted. It was perfect.
That's cool. It's cool that they would drive you. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
so very
Yeah.
supportive, but sort of like slightly distant with it.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure if I'd said, "Would you come and watch me jump around with my top off?" I think they would have done.
Yeah.
I didn't really want them to. That's not cool. Especially when you're 14.
screaming out to your mom and dad who brought, this is my mom and dad who brought me. And you're like trying to be cool. Like, no, that's not working. You guys are posers.
It's been awful. I've just had flashbacks.
Good. That's what we're here for. Well, thanks for flashing.
You said you weren't going to hypnotize me.
Thanks for flashing us back with you. So yeah, let's get back then into the drawing and the story and the schooling. So how did you? I guess we were in. You did the interactive thing, right? You were going to prove this to yourself and to the world, and you were like, no, I just want to do comics.
Yeah, I guess the question was, how did I then get from being in education to being an educator?
Yeah, I'm glad one of us is a host.
Do you see me trying to steer this train back onto the tracks?
Magic.
Went off road there a little bit.
Yeah.
Instead of talking about guitars and things.
Love it.
So after I did my undergraduate, I started a postgraduate in, I think again, it was like a multimedia sort of master's postgraduate program. And I just ran out of money, basically. So I needed to take a job. So I took this.
Before you get into that, did you have a vision for the end of it all? Or were you're just doing stuff?
Nah, I was just happy to be doing things. Enough like jobs came in, because I amassed a bunch of skills during my degree. I could make websites, I could edit video, I could do interactive stuff, and I could sort of stand in front of a room and talk to people without bursting into flames. So I think people could see the value in that. So enough work came in that I was relatively comfortable in, creative work. I'd quit my job at the petrol station that I'd worked at, and I was working for a sort of part-time for a company that the university owned. So I was working as an art director, like working with a small team, making like educational content, I think you'd call it now. It was DVDs at the time. So I was relatively comfortable, and I don't think I had a big long plan aside from have fun, like just do this thing because it was fun at the time. I think I thought when I finish my masters, then I'll start taking it. I'll start taking it seriously at that point. But I basically ran out of money, and that's a real motivator.
If I may, I remember being 18, 19, and I had to learn how to airbrush so that I wouldn't have to go work at the mall. And I'll tell you, I really believe desperation plus desire can get you places.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I really didn't want to go back and work in that petrol station. I didn't want to get up at 5 a.m, like in winter, and like have to, clean a car wash. I didn't want to have to do that. That was awful work. So I was pretty motivated. So I took a job in Birmingham, working for a viral marketing company. It was this sort of new thing, a viral marketing company. So we were making flash games and things like that. And it broke me, basically. I was working like crazy hours for next to no money. And it got to the point where they thought I'd had a brain hemorrhage. Basically, my brain burst almost. So I spent a little time in hospital thinking I'd had a brain hemorrhage. And then...
That's terrible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's really terrible.
That's happened a couple of times now.
Yeah.
I've never had a brain hemorrhage, but I've been in hospital twice with suspected brain hemorrhages. So this was a very stressful job. So I had clients in, I think, Finland and in Miami. So I'd have to get into the office early to deal with the Finnish clients and then stay late to deal with the Miami clients as well. Yeah. And it was not a good job and a very bad boss. really bad boss, really bad.
Yeah.
So I ended up being sort of hospitalized with stress, sort of taken to hospital with, they said they thought I might have been having a heart attack. It was just a very severe panic attack with, I had labyrinthitis at the time, which is like an inner ear infection, I think, a virus.
I was going to say a fear of minotaurs, but
I mean, that's perfectly rational,
but I
think you'd
didn't know if I should say they were so serious right now. And it's serious, but thank you for letting me be irreverent.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah.
It's I think you'd probably call it vertigo.
Yeah.
So it's like that sort of, what it generally tended to work out for me was the ground would feel like it was sort of tilting up, and then if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't be able to tell you which way down was. So I would do things like tumble downstairs, and
so you were in a recliner for a while, right? You were in bed?
Yeah. It was wasn't good. So that wasn't much fun. But I kept in touch with the university that I'd been to, and they said, "Oh, you've done comic stuff, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes." Well, we're going to think about writing this degree course in comics. Would you come in and talk to us about it? I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went in to see them, and they talked to me all about it. And I think I sort of convinced them that what they had in terms of staff and equipment wasn't quite enough. What they needed was a Dan Berry to sort of fill out the team. And I think I convinced them, because then they said, "Would you come and interview for this job that I think I might have made up?" And told them that they needed. And I got the job. And so I started sort of part-time lecturer, and then enough people left, moved on, or I got promoted that I ended up running the department by the end, which was, 11 years I was there. But again, it was one of those jobs where I got promoted to the point where I had a lot of responsibility to make sure things went right, but not enough power to actually make things right as well. So I felt like I was kind of in limbo. And in terms of my own career, I could either continue swapping my health for a paycheck, or I could, jump out and do my own thing and, not swap my health for a paycheck instead.
So did that university position end again with the stress and strain and the vertigo? That did too.
Yeah. There was a few sort of points at which the stress would either lead to my incredibly high blood pressure and overwork, or sort of recurrence of the labyrinthitis, where I ended up in hospital once with, I think, labyrinthitis, and another time with suspected brain hemorrhage again.
Crazy.
Which is not good for you.
No.
It's, so I felt like that was the universe's way of saying, this probably isn't good for you. Probably. And you should probably go and be freelance.
And not so subtle either. Yeah, it's pretty direct.
Yeah. So, I mean, about this time in 2019, I think I'm over it, because I've stopped counting the days. It might even be around the anniversary now. So it would be 2 years around now that I left. But then a pandemic.
Can you see the road signs for that now? Can you see that coming if it were to be coming again?
Oh, the stress.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very much so. I feel like, because everything was in, I used the phrase panic mode all of the time. So we would go into, the preparation for the year, and it would be panic mode, right? We've got students coming. Everything needs to be sorted. But of course, everything would go, slightly wrong, which would then throw something slightly out, which would throw something slightly out, which would then take up the majority of the time to fix. In the meantime, things weren't getting done. So things would get done, but they would be stressful to get there. And then we would be into teaching, which would be nonstop. Teaching is the joy. The job was the difficult part. And then we would teach. And then it would be Christmas. Then you've got the stress of Christmas, and then you get back into teach. Then you've got these big ramps up for all these assessment periods, and then you've got the big assessment period, and then you think, great, it's summer. Like, nope. Then we've got the big shows. We'd have to take them down to London. Then I would have a book to work on, so I'd be working on a book, or I'd have to go and travel for work. There'd be times where I'd get like a week or two's notice that I have to go to teach in China for 2 weeks, or we're sending you to Helsinki for a week. So okay, it's nice to travel. However, I'd like a bit of notice, and I need a bit of time as well. So it was just kind of nonstop. And then we would get to, the holidays, and that would be the time where you could do the rest of your job. So all of the rewriting curriculum, making sure that all of your materials were in line to actually teach. So that's what I would do on my holidays, is get ready for teaching. So then you'd get into teaching, but in the meantime, where they hadn't been there, the rug would have been pulled and everything would have changed, meaning that a lot of the work you'd already done had been sort of displaced slightly. So then you'd have to go back and retool, and the whole thing would start again. So it was trying to eat a picnic on a conveyor belt. Everything kept moving. It was like trying to dig up a hole, and the more hole you dug up, the more hole you found.
Mm-hmm.
So I found myself in panic mode, and it was that constant, like, must do this now, all the time, every day. So when I quit, and all of a sudden my days are my own, it was very difficult to get out of that. You must do everything immediately. So I'll be getting my kids ready for school, and I'm like, we need to go, get your coats on, get your shoes on, and they'll be stood by the front door, and I'm like, right, we need to leave in well 50 minutes, I suppose. An hour. You need to leave in an hour, but we're ready now, which is good. So it took me a while to sort of acclimatize, come through that airlock and turn into a human again. But it was a weird long road, because it was something I'd done for such a long time that I kind of forgot how to relax, I think.
Yeah.
I don't really know what normal people do for fun. I didn't watch Lost. I was too busy working,
That's too stressful a show. You don't want to watch it anyway.
I heard
My
there was some
wife,
sort of smoke monster. I don't know.
my wife sits around and goes, "They don't ever answer anything. I'm so frustrated." I'm like,
Well,
yeah,
I heard that as well,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
frustrated me. I thought, I have no time. I need to work on my documents.
I was a workaholic for a chunk of my career because I'd worked so hard to become relevant in my industry,
Right.
and and the money was really good, and everything, as you know, everything was time related, and I wouldn't turn work down because I was frightened if I turned work down, they would give it to somebody else, and then that person would have the same answers I had, and I would get less work. So there was a
Yeah.
really, and too much of my identity was tied up in it. And
Oh, yeah.
I was working often 70 to 80 hours a week, I think.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of 100-hour weeks thrown in there for good measure. And I would sit down, and if I could show you my monitor now, you'd see I have a list. Like what I do with my clients is I'll put a list of the client and then the projects, and then I kind of break them down in different colors, what's important, what has to, and all that. Well, my list was ridiculous. And I would get up every morning and I would sit in front of that list for a half an hour to an hour, and I wouldn't know what to do first. And I remember my heart kind of beating through my chest, and I was like, am I going to die? Am I going to have a heart attack here? And then I would get to work, and things would just get done then, when I got to work.
Yeah.
But right before my son was born, my wife and I went away on a trip, which was business related. And we had this come to Jesus moment in the hotel room where she said, we can't do this anymore. And I was like, yeah, we can't do this. And we were just in a mess of tears, right? And so the plan when I came back was I told my clients, look, after my kid is born, I'm going to take a month off. And that's just what I'm going to do. And then when I return, I'm going to pretty much work a 40-hour work week. I'm not going to work a lot of weekends. I was pulling all-nighters. I said, I'm not going to pull all-nighters unless you're desperate. Like, but please play those chips sparingly.
Yeah.
And they all understood, and there's still been enough work. And I would say it cost me financially, but as you said, right, you're trading health for finances
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I would say more important is I know my wife and son, and they know me.
Yeah.
I have so much fun with them, and I still get to go and play for a living.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
crazy thing to get your head around.
It is, and I think the thing I'd convinced myself of. I think was that if I ever let go of this job or what I'm doing, it'll never come back.
Yeah.
Like if I, because my identity was I am an educator. Like I felt like that was the thing that gave me any legitimacy in the work that I was producing. Any kind of professional respect that anyone had for me, I felt was tied into the job, which is nonsense. Like no one respects anyone because of their job. But I don't know, I'd convinced myself somehow of that, and it's obviously it's not true. And the fear of leaving and taking that idea of I'm comfortable and I'm going to move into somewhere uncomfortable is terrifying. But then I had to keep reminding myself, and I talked to my wife about it, like I wasn't comfortable. I was deeply uncomfortable. I was making myself unwell, regularly and consistently working 90 plus hours for what? Like I was making myself unwell, and it was not sustainable. Like there was no way. One of the things I used to tell my students is that the way to get things done, and this is me speaking from experience, and this is one of those ghosts of Christmas future like come to haunt them to say don't make my mistakes, is I would draw for them a graph, and there would be an x-axis and a y-axis, and there would be the one moving along the bottom, and that would be time. And I said this will continue rolling on as ever because it does. And then on your up axis, I'm like, this is effort. And I'm like, at a certain point, it's different for everyone. At a certain point, effort turns into stress. And what you need to do is you need to work below the level that it turns into stress. You can work for an amount of time in that stress level. However, trust me, you will get a stomach ulcer, your hair will all fall out, you'll get a grey beard, and your neck will stop working. My neck has stopped working. My back has stopped working. You'll have bowel problems, all the dumb stuff that comes with stress and overwork. Your brain will explode. You'll end up in hospital thinking you've had a brain hemorrhage like I did because you're overtaxing your body. I'm like, if you half-ass it all the time, get up at 10, like work from 11 till 1, eat crisps for dinner, I don't know, work from 2 till 4, and then like maybe put in an hour after, whenever it is, like, taking breaks and rests, but put in 5 hours a day instead of 9 at the end of a project when you're like, God, I'm going to die. And you're putting in all nighters, like just half-ass it every single day, but half-ass it consistently, because every time that you're putting in effort into a project, every time you're putting in effort, work is being achieved. And, putting in that stress effort is it's destructive. And I would always get really annoyed with people like, yeah, no pain, no gain, it's sort of macho approach to like, yeah, all nighters, raw. I'm gonna really, I was that person at one point, and it's really not good for you. And I feel like it at a certain point became normalized that that's what creative people do. They stay up all night, and that they work strange hours because I'm creative at 3 a.m. Like, oh, that's really unhealthy. It's really unhealthy. Please don't do that. Like,
I think that's very, very wise information and hard earned,
yes,
hard earned knowledge.
my God.
I love what you're saying about, you're calling it half-assing, but
Mhm.
I think it's about it's
It's retaining capacity.
yeah, that's it.
If I wanted
Um
to sound clever, which I don't
yeah,
often
well,
do,
you didn't say it in Latin, but
I
good
did
enough, fair enough.
retinium capacitum. I think. I
You're
think it's.
supposed to wave the wand when you say that. We'll have part 2 next week, but I really am grateful for Dan being on and sharing all that he has. Particularly, what jumped out at me in this conversation was the importance of the structure of storytelling, which essentially comes down to communicating. If you're going to communicate with somebody about anything, whether you're telling a story and maybe especially though if you're telling a story or if you are working with a client, you need to work on communication skills around clarity. And this often involves simplicity and noticing little details. Now, around story structure, we can get really caught up in what are the visuals? I just want to get caught up in the visuals. Or what are the words? What is the story? And then we forget to communicate visually, or vice versa. We forget to communicate through the words or whatever tools that we are using to communicate our message to our audience. So I really like that he pointed that out. I loved our conversation on criticism, and that criticism is valuable when it's done well, when it is used as a tool to build somebody up, and not as a weapon to whip somebody with so that you can feel better about yourself. Or we've all had those people in our lives. Maybe we've been those people in our lives. So I encourage that you take another look at criticism and how you take it and how you dish it out. And I love how he described that there are some teachers who are like tour guides. They're not gatekeepers. They're tour guides who are bringing you on a journey to introduce you to concepts, techniques, to new things that may benefit you. I almost think about Gene Wilder leading everybody through the chocolate factory of Willy Wonka and how excited they were to see all of these amazing and new things, and it just set their imaginations on fire. I think that's what good teachers do, albeit less sugar involved in that. And then, of course, we spoke about workaholism and work-life balance and health and how important that is, not just to artists, but to everyone. And if you find yourself grinding a little too tight, might be time to take a step back and take a look at what's actually going on and how you can improve your life. So, with that being said, that's it for this week. We will have a follow-up episode next week to complete our conversation. And if you want to find out more about Dan, look down in, I've got a mosquito on my ear. We've got a lot of mosquitoes this time of year in the summer. It's awful. Anyway, they're sneaking into the house, so I have to fight them. But if you're looking to find out more about Dan, you can find his contact information in the description below. And if you would be so kind as to subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review. Mosquitoes are still coming. And leave us, I guess you leave us a 5-star rating. The mosquitoes that throw me off. And then a review would be awesome. And if you could share it with the artists in your life. And in the same way for YouTube, would you please hit the subscription button and the little notification bell. And as always, share with the artists in your life. Get to work. Figure out what the next step is for you and your business. Maybe it's something creative. Maybe it's something business-wise that you need to address. And just keep on taking those next steps and chipping away at it. And watch out for the mosquitoes. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.